Good morning, friends. I trust this message finds you blessed and encouraged and walking with the Lord Jesus. This is a Christmas special Bible study. It's actually in two parts. I produced this a couple of years ago, and as in one part, but it was a bit long, so I split it into two. And this first part is indeed looking at who were the wise men, where were they from, and indeed why were they such a terror to Herod and all of Jerusalem. And in the second part, we'll be looking at the Star of Bethlehem. So, enjoy. We're looking at Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, and verses 1 to 12. Let me read. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who is born the King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them the time the star appeared, and sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. The Lord bless his words to us. So, as I mentioned, in the calendar of traditional churches, the 6th of January is the Epiphany. We notice in this story it talks about the child, not the baby, and subsequent verses later in Matthew's Gospel would suggest that Jesus could have been 18 months to 2 years old at this point in time. But this story actually raises a few questions. And now it's been preached upon a lot, and all the sort of the gold, frankincense and myrrh and these type of things, and the wise men coming to worship have been preached upon, the great messages. But as a Bible study, I just want to ask a few questions about the story itself. Firstly, who were the wise men? And secondly, what was the star they saw, the sign in the sky they saw? And really the answer to the first question will influence the way we answer the second question. Now, I'll put these on the screen in a moment, but I found a few references useful in the study of these things over the recent years. And one is a book called The Star of Bethlehem, Science, History and Meaning by Michael Allen Patton. And also in the history that I'm about to look at, I found another book which I have called When and Where in the Bible and Throughout History by S. Ruston and E. Michael. And of course, I've used various other resources as well, but they're the ones I found most useful. Now we have to do a brief history, really, to how did Judah get to this point with Herod on the throne, to understand the political situation of the day. You'll see why it's actually quite important, and why, without knowledge of it, our understanding of the whole story is quite opaque. Now, Judah was being ruled by Herod and his dynasty. And ever since the time of the Maccabean revolt, the title of high priest and the role of ruler in Judah was passed down among the descendants of John Hyrcanus and the son of Simon Maccabeus. Now, eventually they started to call themselves kings, so they were taking on more and more personal authority. And one of these descendants, Alexander Janus, he died in 76 BC. And when he did, his wife, Salome Alexandria, assumed the title. So she was Queen of Judah. But when she died in 67 BC, civil war broke out between her sons, Aristobulus II and Hyrcanus II. They both wanted the throne, and they both actually sent emissaries offering money to get support from Rome. They both understood that if they can get the Rome on their side with its legions, they would actually win. In 63 BC, Roman General Pompey, who had recently arrived in the new Roman-controlled territory of Syria, he swept into Palestine and he sought to settle the dispute between these two brothers. Pompey conquered Jerusalem, and after a 3-month siege, and then he reinstated Hyrcanus II as high priest, the ruler of Judah. And Hyrcanus ruled Palestine under Rome with Antipater, who was an Idumean, whom Julius Caesar had appointed regent over Palestine in 48 BC. Now, Antipater was actually the father of Herod. So that was the immediate background in the history. But something was happening on the eastern coast of Palestine, because the Parthian Empire, which was based in what we now call today's Iran, was a great empire in those days. It stretched from the Euphrates River all the way over to the Indus River. And the empire was wealthy because it was positioned astride the Asian trade routes, and is also very military strong. Because it contained its famous mounted bowmen, who were renowned for their Parthian shot. In the New Testament period, Rome regarded Parthia as a potential threat, and the two first had a military confrontation at the biblical town of Haran, or Karher, as it was called in those days, in 53 BC. When the two armies met, it was a crushing defeat for Rome. The Roman forces had actually outnumbered the Parthian forces by 4-1, but they were decimated by the superior tactics of the Parthian army, and especially its mounted cavalry with its archers. In that battle, the Parthians captured 4 of the legendary legionnaire eagles from Rome. Now, following the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, the Roman world, including the Hasmonean state in Palestine, entered into a political crisis and civil war. And the Parthians seized on this opportune moment and the instability of Rome, and in 40 BC they invaded Rome's eastern provinces. Antigonus, who was actually Aristobulus' son, he was the brother who lost the throne, remember, because of Rome's help. He was actually now supported, his son was supported by the Parthian invaders, and he was now placed on the Hasmonean throne. So Parthian Empire had indeed taken away the Roman puppet king and placed one of their own. Now, Herod had been serving as governor of Judah at the time, and he had to flee from Antigonus and the Parthian army. And so he went to Rome to seek support from Octavian and Mark Antony. And at that time, the Roman Senate declared that Herod was the king of the Jews. Now, the Parthian invasion was ultimately pushed back by Roman forces, and Herod was then given the throne in 37 BC. So that's how Herod came to the throne. And prior to him being on the throne, there was another king had been there who had been a puppet, indeed, of the Parthian Empire, just as Herod was a puppet king of the Roman Empire. Now, just before we move on, let's remind ourselves of the date that we believe that Jesus was actually born. When we look at what the Bible says and all the sort of history that's recorded in those pages in Luke Gospel particularly, and when we look at external historical factors, then we come to the conclusion that Jesus was born somewhere between 7 and 4 BC. Now, we're told that Herod's on the throne, and we know from history that Herod died in March 4 BC, so Jesus had to be born before then. And if he was a child of about 18 months to 2 years old, when Herod indeed was visited by these wise men, then Jesus would have to be born 7 or 6 BC. So that's the sort of period of time we're interested in. Now, so who were these wise men that had come indeed from the east? Well, the word that is translated as wise men is actually magi. And now we do know who the magi are from ancient sources. And the historian Herodotus says that the magi were a priestly caste from Media. They'd inherited the Babylonian knowledge of astrology, and Herodotus, together also with other historians such as Plutarch and Strabo, suggest that the magi were partly responsible for the ritual and cultic life of what is then the Parthian Empire, but also they were advisors to the royal throne. They were part of the council that actually selected who was king in this Parthian Empire. Now, Herodotus suggests that the Parthian rulers commonly utilized the Magi's knowledge of astrology and dream interpretation to determine this affairs of state. They practiced a type of astrology, and it was only concerned with the king and with the affairs of state, not with private individuals. And the aim of this Eastern Babylonian rooted astrology was to determine in their mind what they believed was to be the mind and will of their gods. And to do that, they looked at the movement of the moon and the planets against the sky, and also their other influences such as the weather. So we can see why Herod was actually disturbed by a visit from emissaries of the Parthian Empire. You know, this is the empire that only 40 odd years before had actually ruled in Palestine. And this was the empire that had sought indeed to set up their own puppet king on the throne. And now indeed ambassadors from that empire come and say, where is he who is born king of the Jews? Now Herod knew that there was no one born in his family who had been recently born who could indeed take that title. Herod was only king of the Jews by his own cunning, intrigue, and the support of Rome. He hadn't been born king of the Jews. But now, indeed, the Parthians are saying confidently, where is he? Not has the one been born, but they were confident indeed that a king had been born. So Herod consults the religious leaders of Judaism in the day, and they indeed speak about the birth of the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one who God sends indeed to rule and to reign. And so this was indeed a great threat to Herod's dominion. But also the Parthians, what are they planning? Are they hoping to stage a coup? Are they hoping to invade afresh? Herod had defeated them in military battles when he was a young man, but now he's aged and quite demented at this time. And so his kingdom is not stable at all. So we can understand the fear in Herod's mind at this time. So that's who these wise men were, these Parthian ambassadors who were equipped indeed with knowledge of Eastern Babylonian astrology, and also who represented a great empire with a military might that rivaled Rome's own.